Okay, so today we will be talking about scripting using CentOS or in Linux. And I created a cheat sheet here to help me and you, and it's in the module for this week. There is one for Windows, and then we have this one right here. It doesn't even say CentOS, so I need to rename that, and I'll do that real quick. Okay, so if you go into the module, you'll see that there's a chapter 10 for Windows commands from last time, and then there's chapter 10 CentOS page as well. So that is really going to help you with the assignment. So if you look at, yeah, okay, so here's the activity. This is the actual assignment. And then I want to show you the help page that I created. So in this page here, these are the things that I'm going to cover today using CentOS, and it's some of the things we've already done. Like making a directory, showing something on the screen. Make directory showing something on the screen. We've also done the Vim editor. But what we're going to do today is use the Vim editor to make a script. Then we're going to make it so that we can run it and then run the script, and then we'll see what it does. And a few more things that we've already done. I actually, just like I did on the Windows, I added a line here that's not in the chapter, something I believe we covered already, but just in case, because when you're practicing this, it makes a directory. So if you want to keep practicing, you might want to delete that directory so you can run it again to make sure it does what you want it to do. So I added that line there. Then the next activity we're going to do is, and this is actually similar to what the homework is going to have. You're going to create a script again, but this time you're going to use the do construct, or I forgot what you call it. You're going to use the do command, and basically you're going to print on separate lines. So basically this do command, or well, for in, it's actually called a for in command, but it starts with do, and it's for in because this for, and then this is a variable in, and then whatever is in that variable is at the end here. So then you're going to display something on the screen, and then tell it when it's done, and then exit the program. And that's what your assignment is going to need to do. You're going to use the for in, and you will be creating a script. And this time, you won't be submitting the actual script. So throughout the semester, what you've been submitting is Word documents with print screens. The last assignment, I wanted you to submit the actual script that you create for Windows. And that was only for that last assignment. So now we're going to come back and submit just print screens for the CentOS activity for chapter 10. So basically, what you're going to submit is the screen where you actually use the Vim command, the permissions command, and then the run command. Then you're going to show me the output, and then you're going to show me the contents of the script file that you created. So it's just going to be a Word document. And as I say here, the hints, see activity 10-7 for assistance, which is what we're going to cover today. and limit your items to one word because you might have issues. And I'll show you that later. Okay, so that's basically what we're going to do today. But I want to go ahead and first go back real quick. Yeah, I'll do that later. I want to go back and show you a couple of things in the chapter that I didn't cover last time, and yeah, it's just not in the modules, but I think you should know. So basically, yeah, let me open up a window. Basically, what I did here is I created some print screens from the textbook because I wanted to show you stuff. Okay, so first of all, this page in the textbook, page 471, if you see down here, can I zoom in? I can't. If you see down here in this area, yeah, it says get process, where object, sort object, select object. I just wanted to point out, and this is part of the PowerShell Windows section of the book. I just wanted to point out, because see, there are a lot of similarities between different things that you do with computers. So things are just kind of keep on coming back. So I just wanted to point out the fact that this type of code where it says where object, sort object, this is something that you see a lot when you're doing databases, because a database, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, so I'm just gonna throw it out real quick. A database is, you would use Access. Now here I have Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, but Access, oh, here it is. Access right here, well, okay, I'll show you. Access looks a lot like Excel in that it has rows and columns. So here is, let me make it a little smaller. Okay, so here is a row, and then all the columns are across the top. And you could just call them whatever. And basically, it's really just a list. And if you think about it, let's say you do online banking, or even let's look at the college, Alamo colleges. You have information stored on our databases, you know, like your name, your address, your phone number, and on like that. So basically, and then my address, and on like that. So everybody has a row in the database with information that Alamo Colleges needs. Okay, well, in this database here, sometimes you need certain information. So if you were to go into this print screen down here, where object, and what that really means is that you're searching for something. So where object could be where the name is Andrea, or where Bob, or the name is Bob. You're searching through a database for information. Now, if there were a lot of roles in here, there might be a lot of Bobs in here. So if you look back in the book, sort object would be, well, how do you want to sort Bob, or all the first names that are Bob and whatever last name. So, you know, could be Bob Martinez, Bob Smith. So how are you going to sort it? Well, you can sort it by last name. So that's how the sort object is. So, and spreadsheets are kind of similar to the database in that, you know, there are rows and columns, but, you know, there's different purposes for each one of them. Spreadsheets, you do calculations like equals 5 times 5. You have your output there, and you can do reports with spreadsheets. But databases are more powerful. You can do calculations, but it's more for keeping data and reporting out data. So I just wanted to throw that out real quick on that page. Okay, then let's go ahead and look at a couple more pages in your textbook. Okay, so the header and exit. Okay, so we are going to create scripts in CentOS. And I want to point out that on page 477, it tells you about the header line. Basically, every script that you have has to have this line here. And basically, it's to tell whatever you're running it on what the script is for. And a lot of things that you write will have something like that. So if you had like an HTML file, I know that I previously have done HTML for you like that. This is your basic HTML for a web page, but usually you actually want something like .type at the beginning to tell wherever you're running it, like the web page, what type of file it is. And there's more information that you put in there, but that's like the code to start it off. So this is the code to start off your script files. So every script file that you create will start with that. And I also have it in here. And then I also wanted to point out that there's an exit code. So at the very end of your script, you would have exit and then 0. It is a 0, not an O, to end your program. So you start with this and you end with that on every script that you have. Feel free to stop me and ask any questions if you need to in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. Okay. Alrighty, so then we have this page here, 478, with this chmod line here. And this line tells you, or basically you're changing the permissions of the file. So we've previously created like HTML files or TXT files, and they're really just documents. But when it comes to scripts, we need to label it as something that's going to run. And that's why you put in this line here to tell it, okay, this program or this script that I create, my script, needs to be labeled with 755, which means that it's going to be a runnable file. So that's another command that you're going to need for the assignment, but it's when you're at the command prompt. Like after you create it, you change the permissions of the file, and then you can run it. Okay. Okay, so that's it for that. And so let me go ahead and talk a little bit about something that I didn't talk about last time when introducing the chapter. We have, and actually, let me go ahead and open this in the browser so I can get a little closer. Okay, so here is the if statement. Okay, when you're doing programming, and scripting is programming, you can do different things with those scripts. You can do, oh yeah, well, we did mention it a little bit last time, that, you know, different things that you could do with scripts, but I didn't really focus on telling you more about it. There's an if command, and then there's a while command. And basically the if command is a way for you to say, well, if something, then do something, or if something, do something, and if anything else, do something else. Oh, that didn't sound like it made sense, right? So let me make it so that it does make it, it's a little bit more clear. So if you had an if statement would be something like, okay, you're writing a program and you ask, your program is to calculate numbers. So you want to do something with the if statement. And you'll probably ask the user, well, what do you want? What do you want to do? And spell it correctly. What do you want to do? So you're asking the user for that. Then you accept input. And then if the input says one thing, and I'll just do one thing. If the input says one thing, you're going to do this. If the input says something else, you're going to do this. See, so you can actually have your computer do one thing if something happens. And let's say, for example, the question here is, do you want to multiply or add? Okay, so now we're accepting the input. Now, if the input says multiply, then you're going to multiply. If the input says add, then you're going to add. If your input says add, then you're going to add. See, so that's an if statement. And you would, and just think about things that you do with your computer. You know, you click on something, like let's say I click on this minimize button here. What happens? Well, it minimizes. So in your computer, somewhere it says if user clicks the minimize button, then it's going to minimize the screen. If the user clicks the X button, then it'll close that window. So every program, every software package that you have is very likely to have some sort of if statements, depending on what the program does. Does that make sense? Now, you will be asked questions concerning this if statements and while statements, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, but you won't have to do it on the assignment.
Oh, yes, Professor, I have a question.
Okay.
With if statements, is there like, how do you determine how to state the statements? How do you determine how to state the decision and then the command or whatever? How do you,
Well, that's a very good question. And it all depends on the syntax or how the code will be written in whatever language you're using.
so basically so I have to read the code, but then that means that, well, then they can have, like, it's a library, there's a library of code that can have different statements and commands.
Yes,
all right.
Okay. Absolutely.
Okay. I get
you. Yeah, good question. Yeah, and for example, you see at the very end here, here's an if else, and if and else is very common, but the syntax for scripting in CentOS has an FI, and FI is not very common. It would usually have if else, and that's it. And then there's also code where let's say C++, you have the curly braces that you would have around the content that happens if it meets a certain if. And typically there will be like open and close parentheses, and then sometimes you don't have to. And then a lot of times it depends on like semicolons. When it comes to programming, it is very, very specific. So if you need a semicolon there, it has to be there. And if it's not, then you're going to have an error. For example, also, let's say, in JavaScript too. And for example, in JavaScript, if I had a semicolon there at the end of the if statement, the parentheses, then it wouldn't even evaluate the if statement at all, because that's basically saying that's the end of the line, I'm done. So It's very specific on what you do, and it's different with all different programming languages. But I would have to say, well, if you consider Java and JavaScript to be two different languages, they are very similar based on Java. Okay, good question. Okay. All right, so now let's look at the while statement. Now the while statement is basically a loop. And there are typically different kinds of loops. And actually the one that you'll be doing is the for in loop. And you know, there's a for next loop, there's a do while loop. There's many different kinds of loops. And you see that this one actually says while and then do, but there's a do while loop. And there's just so many different ways of doing things. You just need to get familiar with whatever language you're working on at the time. Okay, so the while loop, and what's cool about the while loop is that, and it happens frequently, is that you can do something like, let's say, what's your grade? See, so you can have a program that calculates a grade. So now let's just move away from the if statement for a while. Actually, let me move it down. Okay, so a loop would be something like, oops, would be something that repeats. So you're going to have something like a while. And also notice how I'm indenting when you program, or not so much when you're doing your script now or today, but when you're programming, you want things to be easily read or straightforward. So indenting something that's inside something is much better. Also notice how I did it with the if statement as well. Something inside of these brackets need to be indented. So if you're doing a loop and you want to ask somebody what's your grade, you can just put it in the loop. And following the while command in the textbook, it would be something like while, and then let's just say something, you're going to ask for your grade. And that's going to be repeated. What's your grade? What's your grade? But the question is, well, how many times do you want to repeat it? So that's what goes inside of these brackets here. So while, and you're going to use some sort of variable. And I know that I mentioned variables before. And remember, variables are places in the memory that store something. So if my program asks what's your grade, well, you're going to have a variable that saves what that input is. So a lot of times, go ahead and do grade variable so that it's straightforward. Lots of variables, they really can't have any spaces, or I don't know of any variables that can have spaces. So I used an underscore there. So the variable is grade variable. Now, how do we even know how many times we're going to go through the loop? Well, you would usually ask the user, how many grades do you have? Okay, and then you're going to accept input. But this time, you know what the variable is that's going to hold this, hold the input. I created the variable called grade variable. So the program's going to run. You're going to ask, how many grades do you have? The user is going to type in, I want 5 grades. So then while grade variable is, and this right here is basically what you do to stop the loop. So while grade variable, and somehow you have to make it stop. So let's say something like is less than, or let's say, or I would say something like not equal 0. something like that. So as long as grade variable is not equal to 0, it's going to keep on going. It's going to keep on asking what's your grade. Now the advantage of doing that is, let's say the user entered 100. They had 100 grades to average. So if you didn't have this loop here, you would actually have to ask this question 100 times. What's your grade? What's your grade? What's your grade? And this would be your code displaying this over and over again. So the advantage is that with the while, you can ask something over and over again. Well, then the question is, well, if you have a variable here and, you have a variable here, and how do you average that? If you continue to use the variable over and over again, how are you going to remember? Because remember, a variable is a place in memory that stores information. So once you ask for the grade, and let's say the one that actually represents the grade would be another variable called grade number. Grade number, grade input. Okay, so they input an actual grade. This is the number of grades they have, like 100, and this is the actual grade. This is the variable that's going to hold the actual grade. So, and again, this is input. So we're accepting grade input. Now, how would we average this if this is the one variable that represents the grade? Well, in this loop, you would do something like grade, or say total grades. This is another variable that I'm creating. Total grades is equal to total grades. This would be the total grades, and you're going to add the grade input variable. I'm probably telling you too much though. Okay, but anyway, so what's your grade? You ask the user, you accept what the user gave you. So then you're going to get what the user gave you added to what you already have, and then you're going to have a total for it. And it's just going to keep on going through the loop until it meets the amount of grades that you need. Does that make sense? Or do you have any questions about any of that?
Yes. To the amount of grades that we need / to the amount of grades we've entered.
Right.
Okay. Cool.
Right. So it's just going to keep on going through this loop until it finally meets the amount of grades that you asked for in the first place. Yeah, pretty good. So that saves so much of time. And there's different types of loops that you can do. So instead of doing this, and actually, if you did it this way, you wouldn't only have one variable. You would have to have grade input 1, grade input 2, grade input 3. And remember again, every variable is a place in memory that will store information. And that means with all of these variables, you're going to be keeping or like taking up a lot of space in memory because you're not just using this while loop. Okay. So anyway, wasn't that fun? So anyway, so that's just a little intro on, and these are very common code that you typically use with programming. Now, if you look at the textbook on the very bottom, it has the for-in command that it's different than other programming languages, but not bad. And this is what we'll be doing in class. And basically it has for something in a list, you're going to do something. So let me go ahead and open the lab here, or the activity. Basically, for letter in A, B, C, D, E, you're going to do print out something. And basically what this is doing here is it's creating a variable, and then it's entering information into that variable. So just like we were doing this while statement to put grades inside of a variable, this for statement, for in statement, is actually creating the variable and automatically entering the data that's going to be in there. And yes, that's something that you can do in programming as well. You, instead of asking the user for information, you could just have the information already there, but we won't go into that. So again, you have the for in statement. For, this is the variable, and this is the content of that variable every time it goes through the loop. And this is a loop. For in is a loop. So it's going to do, it's going to print out whatever is in the variable, and it's just going to keep on doing it until it's done. So it's going to print out the A, then it's going to go again into the loop, print out the B, go into the loop again, the C, and then the D, and then the E. And we'll see that later. Okay. That was kind of a quick thing about programming. All right. And just a reminder, or just a little thing I want to add on, is that I'll be teaching beginning web programming next in the spring, and that's going to be fun. Basically, what you'll actually, if you take that class, you'll be learning the HTML code that I have so frequently typed out, which is really cool. But anyway, so back to these images I took for you. Here's actually an example that was in the textbook. Let me go ahead and put it in the browser so I can make it bigger. Okay, so up here, here's the if statement, and this is actually the syntax that David, you asked about. It needs to have the brackets. Remember, on the other one I had parentheses, and this time you do want the semicolon at the end. JavaScript, you don't want it there. So basically, you want the semicolons at the very end of each of these lines. But when it comes to doing it in Linux, you don't. So yeah, very dissimilar. But there is variables, just like right here, there's a variable. There's content in quotes, which means it's just going to be outputted to the screen. But you see, if something is met, you're going to do this stuff. Anything else, then you're going to say this stuff. And then this is the end of the if statement. And then we also have a loop here. This is the syntax of a loop. You have brackets here. So while this is met, you're going to do this. So it's going to continuously run over and over again. So if you look at how it runs down here, you see that the text up on the top, it says counting up to the parameter count limit. This right here, counting up to the parameter count limit, it ran twice. This time it ran 3 times. So that's just a good example. And at this point, you do not need to be so familiar with the syntax. Does it need the brackets? Does it need semicolons? This is just an example of what these things do. There's entire classes. There's actually typically 3 different levels of classes when you do programming. You do programming 1, so you learn some about it. Then you do programming 2, then programming 3, and that's all within one specific programming language. So you can take programming 1 in C++, then you move on to C++ level 2, and then level 3. And we also have in Alamo colleges Java, where you do level 1, 2, and 3. And of course, there's other languages. I believe we teach Python and other things like that. But anyway, so this is just like a little intro of what if statements do and what loops do. Notice that there's a // that's actually running it, running your program. So, but we'll see that later. Okay. Okay. Fun stuff. Let's see what else I have here. Okay, so here's the activity. Let's look at, I believe this is, the last activity that we'll be covering, activity 10.7. And this is just what you would be typing inside of the Vim text file that you create. And so that's the program. And remember, I talked about how it's going to start with this, and then it's going to end with this. And then here's the stuff that it does. Also, I want to point out that see how, well, both of these start off with comments. And comments, or I forgot what they call it here. Okay, they called it something else. Oh, it's just a documentation. That's right. So these, when it starts with the £, that's just documentation to provide information. And this first line that's necessary too, it's just a comment, but it's still important for you to have that there. And what comments or documentation is, it's just information about the program. So this could have anything after that. And like, let's say, for example, documentation would be, well, who created this script? So you would do a £, and then you could write creator is, Andrea or Bob or whatever. You might want to put more information. So saying when you created it. So created on 11/5/2020. On this page here, I actually have a comment at the end of this. So this is the actual code, echo letter as a variable. Then anything after this £, is just documentation or comments telling you what this line is for. So this could say absolutely anything. It just could have a bunch of A's there or whatever. It wouldn't matter to the program. It's just information for the user. And the reason why we would do that is because when you create programs or scripts, so many times you're not the only one that's going to be looking at it. You could be in a team of people looking at different programs, working on them, adding to them. Maybe you quit a job and now somebody else needs to come in and figure out what you're doing. Well, you want comments like this to tell them, well, what are you doing at this point? Why did you do that? It could be, and sometimes you might think, well, if you're a programmer, you should be able to know what that's doing, but it's just so much quicker to read what it's doing as opposed to, okay, now I need to look at this whole thing and figure out what they were doing here. Or maybe even why you did it. Maybe it's something that's not common, but you decided, hey, I need to do it here. You can say why you did it. So that's a comment or documentation. Feel free to ask any questions. I'm just checking through here to make sure that I covered everything I wanted to cover. Yes, I did. Okay, good. Alrighty, so we are actually at our midpoint of class. So let's go ahead and take our break now. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the chat. Oh, yeah, I know, the book scan. I wish I had it digitally. I could have just gone to the book and opened the pages, but no, I had to take pictures. Okay, so let's go ahead and break now. When we come back, I will be doing the activity